give more returns. Get more security and more interest on your fixed deposits from Sri Lanka's largest finance company, LMDtv Finance.
To curb corruption, one must be courageous to confront and rise up against the corrupt. Sleep well, be guided by ethics and standards for peace of mind.
Refresh Sri Lanka for a civic-minded society. LMD, the voice of business.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. Tonight on the forum, we're zooming in on the apparel sector, and with us we have the COO of MAS Holdings, Shakthi Ranatunga. Shakthi, it's very nice to have you on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off the discussion by setting the stage a little bit for the audience. Can you give us your assessment of the state of the apparel sector right now that we are slowly but surely emerging from the crisis?
Okay. So Ruwandi, in 2022, when we had this crisis, of course, we can't forget what happened in 2019, 2020 and 2021. And 2022 was unfortunate with the constitutional crisis that we had. As you know, Sri Lankan's apparel export accounts for about 45% of the export earnings. The first thing that actually happened with the crisis was the challenge we had around getting fuel and keeping the operations alive. Of course, we had to keep our customers informed about the unfolding situation in the country. There was a lot of concern around security and safety. Obviously, there were restrictions put by our customers on traveling to Sri Lanka at the time. But I think we were very proactive, and the apparel industry as a whole was able to react fast. We were able to build our capacity in terms of fuel and energy and ensuring that we keep our operations running. As you know, the factory is required. We had to transport our employees. Yes. We had to, keep the mills running. Mm-hmm. So it was a big task, but we definitely were able to manage that situation in 2022. Mm-hmm. 2021, the industry was hitting about 5 billion. Actually, 2022, after the COVID, everyone was very optimistic that we would have a slowly growing trend. And in the first half of the 2022, we actually had a stunner performance. And actually, 2022, I think we hit 5.5 billion. And then we also, with the crisis, we saw some downturn, but I wouldn't say it's all related to the situation that happened here in Sri Lanka, right? So we had to ensure that the impact of what happened in 22 as an industry in Sri Lanka was minimal. So whilst we had some disruption, by and large, we were able to manage it. Right now, the situation is looking a little positive. Of course, I must tell you, going from 2022 to 2023 was a complete disaster. In my 24 years in this industry, it is probably the worst performance that we saw of an industry here. And actually, we went down to 4.5 billion, right? We lost $1 billion. And that is not necessarily related to what happened here in Sri Lanka. There was a lot of situations outside, geopolitical situations that contributed towards it, the recessionary situation out in the markets that we serve, and several other factors that impacted how the buyers engaged with us out here in these regions. So of course, one of the other biggest thing was the depreciation, right? As an exporter, it sounds very positive. Everybody said, oh wow, it's good for you as an industry. Of course, our input cost goes up, exactly. Right? Cost of living goes up. And in that year, if I'm not mistaken, we had to make 3 to 4 salary adjustments in the year, right? Just to ensure that our employees are able to manage and survive. And it was tough because you're dealing with a tough market condition. And also because the first half was very good, so we had some strength. But as we went into the second half, the outside external impacts outside of Sri Lanka were starting to now fold in. So making those calls, we had to be very cautious. We couldn't make some industries, some organizations made fixed corrections, but we took a paced approach. And today we can see some recovery, right? We are optimistic. 2023. By and large, our operations are stable, right? So we don't have issues in terms of import restrictions or import challenges. Access to energy is okay. We don't have that challenge anymore, and we are able to manage that. But in 2023, with what happened in the external markets, and we actually had to make some corrections. So right now, looking forward to 24 and beyond, we see some growth. 2023, we had almost close to about 20% of our capacity open, right? When you talk about the size of our business, we were at $2.5 billion. We closed close to $2 billion last year. As an industry also, we came down from 5.5 to 4.4, so that's a significant contraction. But 2024, we can see some positivity coming in.
And is this positivity shared by neighboring competitors as well? Because we're hearing Bangladesh is apparently making, good out of all the market trends in the US and the UK, but I think you'll know.
So I think before we go to Bangladesh, let me explain a little bit in terms of the external factors of, we had the issue that we had the constitutional crisis we had here in 2022. And second half of 2022, we saw our customers holding back because there were suddenly these inflationary situations in the market that we serve. About 90% of our exports go to either the US, to the US markets or to the European markets. And then there was the wars, the conflict that came about in Russia and Ukraine, then the inflation, the recession that happened. Then we ran into a situation where the customers, because they were very optimistic for the upturn in 2022, had a lot of stock, right? Which now they couldn't, sell, so they were discounting, and in certain situations they had inventories beyond 6 months, right? And that had a knock-on effect. So till they cleared that inventory and till the consumer confidence came back and the footfall in the retail space improved, we saw that impact in 2023. So 2023 was a very bad year for us. We had about, like I said, 20% of our capacities was open. And a lot of the companies in the industry, definitely in the big five, the larger, at least the top 5 here in Sri Lanka, we all had to make corrections. We either had to close days or mothball plants, or even in some instances we had to right-size the plants in order to manage it, because we had a continued almost 18 to 24 months of a very flat or a drop in our demand. So that 2023 was a very challenging year. Coming to your question around Bangladesh and the upside, Bangladesh is actually a very formidable force in the industry, mainly driven by what was happening between the relationships in China and the West and the US markets. And they were possibly the biggest beneficiary of that. I mean, it's a $40 billion industry. And it's their primary industry. So they have put a lot of focus on that industry in terms of providing the incentives, the infrastructure, encouragement, very much like how the industry was fueled in Sri Lanka, maybe 30, 35, 40 years ago, right, with a lot of focus going into the industry. And definitely Bangladesh strength is playing in that value brands section. They have slowly but surely improved. And yes, they are a very competitive, formidable force, like I said. Is it something that Sri Lanka as a country can compete with? I'm not sure that is the route that Sri Lanka should take, and Sri Lanka has taken, because we don't have that level of scale, and we are still very effective in the way we have been set up, and therefore we have to ensure that we get the most of what we have. As a nation, we have the capability, because as a fashion apparel manufacturing destination, Sri Lanka is seen because it has all the top brands in its portfolio. So it also has invested in process excellence, in technology. The industry as a whole has invested a lot in terms of being newness and innovation, right? And that is the differentiation that Sri Lanka as a competitor in this industry should focus on. I don't think focusing on price and scale is our game, right? So I think if we want to differentiate ourselves, we have to continue to invest in technology, product, process, right? We always differentiated ourselves in terms of our ethical practices, right? And those are the things that will help us differentiate also for the future. So now the ethical practices has graduated to being sustainable practices, right? So we have a good platform to compete on those things. Price, of course, in the new ways of work, it is a reality, because we believe that both the consumer has and our customers or the retailers have set both price and the volumes, so it has got reset. So we have to be able to compete for sure.
Perfect. And so that's about competition. I think this is an unfair question if I ask you to rate the competitiveness of Sri Lanka right now to what we were before all this roller coaster of crisis came. Is it the same, or would you say it's deteriorated or accelerated?
Let me put it this way. Let me say that the others have caught up.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it.
Right. In order for Sri Lanka, after a certain point, I mean, we were as a nation, we were very aggressive about the training development, the infrastructure, making sure we as an industry we've invested heavily on the supply chain, looking at the verticalities, looking at the capabilities. We have a very good portfolio in terms of our product capabilities, and there was a lot of investments that went in. Of course, the nature of how things have transpired in the last maybe 5 to 10 years also has an influence. And also the customers, because of the scale in Sri Lanka, they also have a certain threshold, no? So they will come to about 30% exposure into a country, and then they will minimize or mitigate that risk, right? So they will also look to other countries, other regions that can give them the competitive advantage, because they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket, and surely not from what we saw in the last 3 years, right?
And this
absolutely. So this the de-risking, the acceleration of this de-risking of the customers was very important, not only for the customers but even for us, right? So now today MAS as an organization and most of the organizations in the industry, Sri Lanka is possibly is the birthing place, but we are all geographically spread. I mean, we have 17 locations and we have 9 manufacturing locations globally, right? And that is to cater to the differing demands of the customer, and also to have a risk mitigation in terms of the geographies that we operate in. And that is a necessity of business, right? How do we differentiate the apparel industry in Sri Lanka is basically through what I just explained to you. We have to really understand what makes us different, and play to our strengths, and also try to do things that others cannot do, which is important. So rating, where are we? I think we are still in a good place.
Okay.
There's still, but we have to work harder today.
To keep
Others
it.
have caught up, right? So we have to now think of ourselves very differently, reinvent ourselves, right? In order to compete with this changing world.
It's time to take a very short break, but we'll soon be back to talk more about Apparel.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging Media.
You're mobile, and so are we.
Gets me going.
Grab the Lite 87 app at the Apple App Store or Google Play now.
87.8 and 87.6 island-wide. Lite 87.
Welcome back to the show. Today we are talking about the apparel sector with the COO of MAS Holdings, Shakthi Ranatunga. Shakthi, we spoke of competition. Can we talk a little bit about collaboration from a national point of view? We are seeing the government is trying to collaborate, with Japan, and I'm sure there are other countries also in the list. What are the benefits of collaboration for us right now, and also what are the challenges when we go in that path?
Yeah, access to markets is paramount, right? In the past, Sri Lanka benefited from certain trade agreements that we had, which kind of helped us propel this industry. Therefore, there is a big role that the governments have to play in terms of providing this access to markets. Historically, US and UK, and still today, Europe and the US remain our biggest markets, right? But we don't have the best benefit of being in those markets right now. Not that we should be looking for incentives, but that's the way the world is today. There are so many trading blocks and trading agreements and that trade agreements that have been formed, and that is part of the global business, right? And Sri Lanka should also drive that agenda. Whilst we, and today our competitors have very strong and very good agreements with markets that they serve. We should look in the same way of this region, because if the world is saying this is the region, Asia, South Asia, East Asia, Asia is the next growth region, right? And we can see that in some shape or form. And therefore, we must be aggressive in terms of building those relationships and getting access to those markets, right? For us to benefit from that. India is our largest, it's the fastest growing and the largest market that we have in proximity. So definitely Sri Lanka has to have a very strong collaboration and relationship with India, and we must look to benefit from that. We of course are very optimistic about the collaboration with India and working with India, and because that is we have an advantage of having the proximity to the markets, having a history of servicing retail businesses. So we need to work with enterprises out in India to get the best benefit out of that. And having that collaboration with the authorities, organizations, governments, and also organizations in India is very important, because whilst they are close, we also have to understand how we do business in those regions. Likewise, Japan. Japan in the apparel, fashion, retail space is a big business, right? And it very high standards, very stringent quality controls, and very price competitive. It's not expensive. It's not cheap, right? Why is it not cheap? Is because the quality requirements and the demands of the consumer requires that the product is of high quality. So, and we need to have those collaborations, and we need to grow. Today we are at about, we have about 90% of our export is to the US and we have a very small component of it going into the Asian markets. So for us, we see that as a very important opportunity, not only as an opportunity but also in terms of mitigating risk.
Talking of India, there's talk, about vertical integration of supply chains, especially because we've had a lot of backlash because of import restrictions and, fabric not being there, or, raw materials being in short supply. So the government is looking at encouraging more vertical integration in the supply chain, especially with Indian partners. What are your views on this?
Very important. It's a very, very important aspect of our industry. At least when I joined this industry almost 20 years plus, the apparel industry, the apparel manufacturers were separate, the supply chain partners were separate entities, and we could source from any geography. So one was the supply chain investments were very heavy, apparel investments were not as bad. There was a lot of consideration to be made when you set up mills, etc. Energy, water, resources, financing, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. But today, with the situation that has unfolded in the markets we serve, there is more drive towards localizing or regionalizing the complete chain, value chain, right from the fabric maker all the way to the finished good, right? And therefore, verticality is becoming very, very important. Today, we see a lot more fabric manufacturers crossing the line into apparel manufacturers because they can provide the lead times, the quality, the pricing, right, and the competitiveness, the newness through that value chain. That's one model that's evolved. But that doesn't mean that you have to have it as a one-owned entity. It's about building the necessary infrastructure in your region or in your locality to be able to service the customer. So there is a requirement of greater collaboration between the manufacturing, the finished goods, and the supply chain. Answering your question about how important it is it to Sri Lanka? It's very important. Still, when you look at the product in terms of cotton or synthetics, South Asia is predominantly a very big cotton manufacturing region with the capability of manufacturing finished goods. Synthetic is still a much more stronger play in East Asia. And therefore, there is some level of fragmentation between the regions. But it is important increasingly to bring some of those capabilities into the region if we need. Definitely, if you want to service a market like India, having that supply chain built and that verticality built is going to be very, very important. And especially building that synthetic verticality is going to be very, very important.
Do you see it happening anytime soon?
Right now, in terms of our operations or of our industry, we still have the historically established players. We haven't seen a lot of new players, especially in the synthetic field, coming in. Of course, the positive is some of these players, the established players in the industry, are also now slowly but surely investing in new technology and moving into the synthetic space, which I think is the right thing to do, right? Because that is where the demand is moving. And therefore, building that capability is going to be very, very important. Sri Lanka has some challenges, right, in terms of our energy costs are not very competitive, right? So, and our ease of business is still, there are some challenges around it. Other nations that compete with us for this space have packaged things much better, have better energy costs that make it more viable for these energy heavy industries to come and set up. So we have, and of course when you're talking about 40, 50, $100 million investments in a location, the investors will look at these stuff because these are not some things that they would want to put lightly. So they will take into consideration. So we have some work cut out for us. Definitely when you talk about India is very heavily incentivizing and inviting and providing
investor-friendly
bundled options for investors to come and set up, because for them, they want to see the apparel industry grow to 100 billion, and they have a target by 2026 to go to that, right?
Wow.
So they have a very aggressive drive towards it, and we can see it. So if we are to benefit from that, we also have to gear ourselves up for it.
We're almost at the end of our conversation, but I'm going to ask my final question along those lines. When we are gearing up, I mean, it's not just about the players in the industry. It's not just about the government. I think it's a holistic approach that we should take, including the civic society, from where the human talent is also coming. So, looking at all the stakeholders, what is your message on how we can all gear up to go to our goal?
It is definitely very important. And I look at what has happened today, and if you talk about the significant brain drain that we've had, and we definitely have it. And when you think about how the industry has outperformed in a very globally competitive space, Sri Lanka and us as an industry have differentiated ourselves from being very ethical, capable partners. And it is not words, it's indeed. The way you look after our people, the way we engage in ethical practices, the way we ensure we live up to our values. And it is that environment that enabled organizations such as ours and many other organizations in Sri Lanka who have performed very well in our space to really thrive. And that is an integral part of it, right? So, being definitely civic-minded, I strongly believe that once corruption gets in,
I like the positivity once it ends.
it is very difficult to root it out.
It is.
So I am not the expert of how to root it out, but I would urge to try and avoid it. And it's not easy, I'm sure. And therefore, ensuring that we create an environment where our people can thrive is very, very essential for the future and for our future success for sure. And as an industry and as an organization, we have proved that for now. This is a famous saying that our chairman once made, is given the right conditions and the environment, we will be better, either equal or better than anyone in the world. And that has been built around that.
And we remain hopeful.
Hope dies last.
Yes, it does. Thank you. We've been talking with the COO of MAS Holdings, Shakthi Ranatunga. Shakthi, thank you very much for being part of the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And to all our viewers, thank you very much. And until next time, do take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.